Thanks for joining us for the second part of our discussion on the buildings lost, the ones that were saved, and the ones we should keep an eye on. I'm Wendy, and my co-host is Chris, and this is Demolished Salt Lake and Preservation Wins, Losses, and What to Watch in 2024, Part 2. Hello, and welcome to episode 32. When we left off last time, we were talking about preservation wins. Let's pick back up on our conversation with special guest Rachel Quist. Our friend Adrienne White of House Genealogy was going to join us, but she was under the weather and not able to make it. All right, let's get back to our discussion. We got some good news on the front of the Al Razul Islamic Center, which is at 1247 West, 4800 South. It's in Taylorsville, and we rarely talk about Taylorsville and historic preservation, but this was an old LDS chapel. It was built in 1894. The center purchased it in 2008, and it is an old building, and it needs some help. And so they were chosen to participate in the National Fund for Sacred Places program. So what's really cool about this program is it will provide $250,000 to the center for much needed upkeep, restoration, all that stuff. But the center needs to raise about $400,000.
Yeah.
And this is where you can come in. So the funds will go towards, everything that they need to do. But it's somewhat of a matching grant. Mm-hmm. So you can go to AICU, TAU, that's AICUtah.org, and help them reach their goal.
Now, the importance of a matching grant and why they're offered this way so many times is because they want to make sure that this is actually a building that's important to the community. So you show that it's important to the community by providing matching funds or matching labor. And so that's one way for you to show that preservation is important, or telling this more diverse story of Utah's history is important to you.
Right. Right. And I mean, they do a lot of good for the community in their area. So it's a really great way if you're looking to do something for this holiday season. You can head over and help them along.
Yeah, and I would also ask that people outside of Taylorsville consider donating to this. This should really be a statewide issue.
Right. It's not a local Taylorsville issue.
The reason why I'm saying that is because we have heard from a couple people that some neighbors there are very uneasy of having an Islamic center in Taylorsville. And so there is going to be some apprehension from the people there to donate, or whatever their ulterior motives are, right? Like, people have biases, and there's nothing we can do about that.
Right.
However, well, except for education. But I think that, people should probably think about that, take that seriously, and use it as a reason to donate and get other people involved to donate for this, because they are facing issues within the community that is stopping them from right now reaching their goal probably. So
right.
If you can get involved, make a donation, let's make this a statewide thing.
Is it tax deductible?
That's a good question.
If they're a nonprofit, it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. All right. This is kind of a fun one. So this is the William F. Beer Estate Carriage House. And it's at 181 B Street in the Avenues, built in 1898, designed by Richard Cletting, which we talked about a little earlier. And Stephen Pace acquired this in the 70s. And what he wanted to do was, I should add that it was added to the National Register in 1977. Again, that's just kind of an honorary thing. It didn't didn't make sure that anything would happen. But Pace really wanted to see this carriage house be utilized somehow.
Yeah.
And how long did he fight for? So what he wanted to turn the carriage house into something that could be adaptive use,
Yeah.
like more housing. And do you know how long that he went? It was about a 10-year process for him.
Yeah, I think it was closer to 15. I know the 10 years of actively working with the city on it, but he started thinking about it at least 15 years. By some accounts, he told people closer to 20. But yeah, this is something that came across the council. Kirk Huffaker was involved with this. He was representing him. And they weren't getting any traction with the city because of red tape. And they finally stepped in and asked my husband, Chris Wharton, who's on the city council, knowing that Chris cares about historic preservation, and asked him, can you do anything to help us? Because we want to make this into an ADU and have it be affordable, and it's a historic structure. We don't want to see it go away.
Kind of a win-win-win for
Really,
everything, right?
It really was. And what they ended up doing was, by working with Chris and the city on this, the city was able to streamline their policies around it to where now other adaptive reuse stuff like this that comes before the city as a historic district will be able to go through the process a lot easier.
It's just fantastic.
And so not only did it help him, but it's going to help people in the future. And, sadly, Pace passed away in October. It was a couple months after this happened. Talking to my husband about this, and I talked to him a lot about it, my husband says he will always remember this because he really enjoyed working with Pace and Kirk on it. And, just to hear that this guy never gave up on this and was finally able to get it before passing is just such a wonderful story, and also an achievement. But it's helped shape policy in the city and process.
That's fantastic.
And it's nice that it wasn't just a rezone for this one specific area, or at least it is now helping the entire city meet its affordable housing goals and preserve historic buildings in the process, and also making sure all of that brick and stonework and everything else involved doesn't end up in our landfills.
Yeah.
So there's no downside to this at all.
No, this is just fantastic. And thank you to Stephen for his hard work throughout the years.
But again, it took a long time.
It took a long time, and it shouldn't take that long.
Yeah. And, like Rachel said, you're talking about things that aren't mutually exclusive.
Right.
It's historic buildings, it's affordable housing, sustainability, good public policy, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
It's everything that Salt Lake is trying to strive for.
Yeah.
Yep.
And to be the leader for the state in those endeavors.
Right. And on that same note, we have the Liberty Wells Recreation Center. It's the corner of 400 East and 700 South. Newer building, built in the 50s. But it is such an important part of this community that when it came up that it was going to be demolished for a new development, that the community really came together and said no.
And it's on a big lot because it had a field, an athletic field associated with it as part of the recreation.
Right. And with this pushback from the community and through talks with the new developer, that they're actually now going to incorporate the recreation center and adaptive reuse it into the new development. So it's going to turn into housing, which is fantastic.
It's called the Liberty Wells Recreation Center, but it's really in Central City.
It is.
It is in the heart of the Red Line District of Salt Lake's Central City. And
if you just drive on 400 East, you'll be like, oh yeah, I know that building.
And you know what's funny with how preservation has kind of worked out in terms of our historic districts? If you overlay the local historic district as well as the national historic district and kind of maybe individual historic sites, you know what the area is that's been left out of all of that is the south side of Central City. which happens to be the red-lined area
Right.
of Salt Lake City. And this building is right in the middle of
Yep.
that.
Yep.
So any sort of win for that neighborhood is fantastic.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Very, very happy. And kudos to the developer
Yes.
for listening and understanding the importance of the building to the community.
Yeah. And as I understand it, that developer hasn't necessarily listened to the concerns
Yes.
of the community.
Yes.
I get a lot of groans when I give my walking tours of that neighborhood when I talk about that developer.
Right. Yes, I've heard that too. And the last one on our list comes from our friend Adrienne. We hope you're feeling better, Adrienne. And this is the Musser House. And it's at 2157 Lincoln Street. It's in Sugar House. It was built in 1892. And it's kind of a little hidden gem.
Yeah, you know this house.
Yes.
You won't know it by the name of the Musser House. But if you have ever taken kind of the back way into the Sugar House liquor store, it is the most prominent, beautiful Victorian home.
Yep. It's gorgeous. And, I mean, surrounded by trees, it's like I said, it literally is a hidden gem.
But it also has a little fascinating history to it.
Oh.
It is a true polygamy house.
Nice.
Really?
So, you hear a lot of people, oh, that's a polygamous house because
yeah.
it's a duplex or something.
Right.
No, that is not how that all worked. But this is a true polygamy house, and it was a polygamy house after the mandate to stop polygamy in the LDS Church.
Wow.
It was a little offshoot of fundamental Mormon beliefs. And there's one guy that I kind of follow the history of him, who's Dr. Gamble. He was an osteopath. I've got to do a posting on him. He's so just fascinating. But it looks like, he came into Salt Lake and was like, oh, this polygamy thing is fantastic.
I'm going to build a house and have polygamy.
Well, he converted to Mormonism and dumped his also doctor wife and then married, several wives. But he had meetings with his other, polygamy faction group at the Musser House.
Oh, no way.
It was known as the polygamy house.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. I love it. Yes. Do a post on that. We'll share it.
Yeah, it was like the Forestdale polygamy house, because it used to be called the Forestdale neighborhood. I mean, oh gosh, he's a fascinating
That's
character. I've got to
fantastic.
do a post on him.
Well, so this entire block is going to be raised, from what I understand, or parts of it. But the developer, again, kudos to another developer. I'm not sure who this developer is, but they're going to integrate this house into their new development. So it is not going to be demolished. I don't know how it's going to be reused. Adrienne would be able to tell us.
Yeah, I think she said it was going to be reused as part of the community center, like the clubhouse.
Fantastic.
Yeah, she's done some postings on it over
She has. So House Genealogy on Instagram and TikTok. So another win. And another developer that has seen the importance.
And this is why I love Salt Lake City history so much, is it's got the quirks that other cities in the nation don't have.
Right.
It's always like,
Who else can claim to have a polygamy house?
I know. Salt Lake has like the only cemetery in the country that was designated by a congressional act,
Right.
which is Mount Olivet. There's
Mount
always
Olivet.
these firsts
Right.
and onlys, and didn't this is kind of so odd.
And these are the things that Rachel dives into.
Like the Salt Lake City Cemetery is the biggest city-owned cemetery.
Right,
in the United
municipal
States.
cemetery in the nation. Yeah. So we had definitely a lot to celebrate this year. Now moving into 2024, we have some buildings that are on our watch list. These buildings, well, we'll go through them and kind of talk about them. We have the Second Ward Assembly Hall. And it's at 438 East, 700 South. This was built somewhere in the mid-1880s. It's one of 2 assembly halls that are still standing.
And it's adobe.
It came up for sale, and in the advertisement, it was advertised as a developer's dream, which, if you read between the lines, mean, hey, demolish it and build something that looks completely out of character for this neighborhood. Yeah. It's no longer listed. I checked, and it's not. It's still standing. It's not listed. I don't know if it was purchased, but.
And this is near the Liberty Wells recreation.
It's pretty close.
It is. It's just, a couple houses down. But the thing about this house, it was a residential structure the last time it was used.
Right.
But it's had a long history. It is also in that Central City, south side of Central City, Red Line District. Again, it doesn't have any protections.
It's just outside of the local historic district.
Which happens to be right on the line of the red line / yellow line when you look at those old housing maps. Anyway, what really gets me about this building is that it has had the same owner for decades. So it's a long-time owner who has not done any maintenance on it and has deliberately allowed this building to deteriorate, which is demolition by neglect.
Yeah. Yep. Makes it easier. Makes it easier when they sell it to be able to say, oh, it's not worth it.
So, and when I give my tours in that neighborhood, people always ask about that building. They say, are you going to talk about it? I'm like, yes, I'm going to tell you about it.
Well, it stands out. I mean, as an adobe building, it stands out.
It does.
And there's a couple people that reached out to me that asked questions if they could, if they bought it, if the zoning would allow for it to be a house. And when I talked to them, I was like, yeah, it would be. I just looked at the listing. The listing actually expired. The interesting thing about this is it was originally listed for $450,000, and when it expired, it was up to $500,000.
What?
I think somebody might have misread the market there.
Yeah.
Well, but that might be a good thing. I think that they were wanting to sell this as a developer's dream, quote unquote, and with higher interest rates, as we know, development has stopped on bigger projects like this. It's only the acres is only 0.15.
Oh,
it's not a
super
huge,
small lot.
Yeah, not a big lot.
I mean, the house pretty much takes up the entire lot.
Yeah,
there's a big addition on the backside of the adobe
that's right.
structure.
Yeah, I would love to see somebody step up and buy this place. It's still, it's expired. It doesn't look like it's going to sell anytime soon. But I mean, it's a big building. It deserves some love. It could be made into affordable apartments, art studios. Who knows? It has a lot of options that it could be used for.
Yeah.
It will require some money and time, but when it's done, it'll be worth it.
Definitely worth it. We have another adobe house on our watch list, and this is the Brinton House at 4880 South Highland Circle. Sorry. Again, one of the oldest adobe houses still standing in Salt Lake City, built in 1879. And this one came up for sale and never sold. I think
all right, so this house is by the old Cottonwood Mall, but it's kind of hidden in a little circle. Now, the thing about the Brinton family is that they were one of the first settlers in Holladay, and so there were a ton of Brinton homes. This is the last of those. It's also one of the oldest in the county because it's an adobe home. But it was sold to a developer.
Yes.
Who was going to demolish it. And there was, again, community advocacy.
It even made the news.
Yes, it did. The developer started reconsidering the demolition. Who was the architect who provided plans to the developer to
I
work around it?
We need
his
Adrienne
name.
here to tell us that.
Yeah.
I can't remember. But yeah, there was an architect that went in and redid the plans for the development, showing how the Brinton House could be incorporated into the new development as housing.
Yeah, instead of 15 townhomes, you'd have 12 in this. And they were just like, nope, not good enough.
Right. But that's, that's been a model for a lot of developers even in the 70s and 80s. There's the Miller Estates, which has a bunch of housing, from the 80s around it. But in the center of it is the old mill pond and the old adobe home.
Uh-huh.
So this is something that has a long history that could have happened.
Yeah. I think the sale on this it's one to watch because we don't know what the developer's doing.
Yeah.
As far as we know at the moment, there's nothing planned
Yeah,
to
there's
go
no
forward.
movement. There's nothing planned. It's
the
still
developer
just sitting there.
Has said they would sell it for what they have into it.
Right.
Yes.
But I do not believe anybody has stepped forward.
I haven't heard anything about it in months.
Yeah.
But it is still standing. I was there maybe a month ago.
Yep, I drive by it when I go in the office. I kind of have to take a side street over and then,
It's fenced off. Now, the thing that's interesting also about this house is that it was purchased for the purpose of preserving it, I want to say in the 80s. And that longtime owner specifically gave lower rents to businesses that were in it, simply because he wanted it preserved, he wanted it used. But when he died, his children then sold off the property.
Got it. Yeah.
This is interesting. And I really wish more owners, and maybe this is how we can educate people on subjects like this, but if you're an owner of a historic home and it's outside of a local historic district and you want it preserved and it has as much prominence or importance as this one, get a historic preservation easement on it.
Right.
You own it, you can do it.
Yep.
And have it protected even when you're gone.
Yep.
It's probably one of the best things you can do for buildings like this.
I agree. Okay, well, we're going to hit a very controversial topic right now, and that is West High. This is at 241 North, 300 West. It's the oldest public high school in Utah, founded in 1890. It is owned by the Sully School District, and there has been a lot of talk about what to do with West High. There is problems with the building. It has not been maintained properly. The basement floods. There's bats that have found their home there. And so the school district is deciding what to do with it. And there's been a lot of discussions. Luckily, they've incorporated a lot of the community involvement into come in and talk about it, give options for preservation. But the one problem is there's nowhere else to build a new West High other than the lot that West High is on now. So that would mean one of two things: demolishing the entire building to build a new school, or saving the facade of the building and building a new school. You guys can weigh in. My instinct is that the best we can hope for with this situation is keeping the facade. That's my instinct about what's going to happen with West High. But I don't see the high school being saved and preserved. What are your thoughts?
I think you're spot on. To me, that seems where it's headed. This is a serious conversation around, is it the school district's job to save historic buildings? Is it the city's? And, what's best for the students? We've heard from a lot of parents that have students that go here or their kids that go there, that, it's not really a place of learning anymore for them. or as good. It's not as good of a place as it should be for learning.
Or that it has been,
Yeah.
like a lot of the parents will say, oh, it was such a great place to be. And then you're right. We hear from these parents saying our kids and the teachers deserve better than what's going on in there right now.
There's issues with heating and air conditioning.
And
also bats.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big issue.
Now, was Old East High School ever in that same condition? I'm just thinking that the Salt Lake School District is kind of notorious for not investing in its downtown west side, more diverse communities.
And I think that's a citywide school district issue.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah, it drives me nuts.
I mean,
being a family who lives downtown, right?
Right.
And with Salt Lake City saying, hey, we want more families
to move here, but
the school district is terrible.
Right. And
unless you live on the far east side.
Right. I mean, I had heard, and I could be misremembering, but I think I'd heard somewhere along the way that school districts really build buildings for about 50 years. That's, and like I said, it could be misremembering, but it seems like, I mean, if you think about it, we think about all the high schools that are being demolished and rebuilt. There was, it's currently happening to Skyline, Highland, there was Union Middle School, in Sandy where I live. And those are right about 50, 60 years old,
Yeah.
But the other problem is there's just nowhere, there's just no land to build. So we see the same issue come along where we build on the we take a couple of years and we build a new building where, the baseball fields are, or where the soccer fields are, or, parking lot, whatever. And then we move kids into there and demolish the old building. And that's where the new soccer fields or parking lot is now.
Well, there's so many things coming to head with this, I think, when you start talking to people about it. It's not only like the bat issue or the air conditioning and heating. It's also the room size. It's also the hallways. It's student growth of how many more kids there are in this valley, and the need for bigger schools.
Right.
And also different teaching methods now that are being applied and used, and these smaller room sizes aren't really allowing for screens and stuff.
Technology updates.
Yeah. And so, all these are considerations that have to be taken into consideration in this discussion.
Right.
And it becomes a very hard discussion, I think. And, I think Rachel's 100% correct. There is an issue with the school districts not investing in West Side schools.
Right.
But also there's like so many other things that are happening at the same time that makes this a really difficult situation.
Yeah.
And that's why I think we're all sort of pessimistic on it standing, is because we recognize these issues, and we also recognize that a lot of families in the area want their kids to have a better place to learn, and that's also safer.
Yep.
I'm not even sure what earthquake renovations have happened on this place.
And that's also the problem, right? If they decide to go in and renovate, then that's where everything comes into play about seismic upgrades and all the rest of this upgrades that right now they aren't required to do because they're not doing any renovations to the building.
Yeah. And this is also just down the street from my house, and I drive by it daily, and I do quite enjoy this building, and we're getting ready to adopt a kid. And one of the conversations I've had with my husband is school safety.
Yep.
And not just because of natural disaster, but also we live in America. We know it's with schools, it's probably not a matter of if, it's a matter of when a shooting happens.
Yeah.
And, is this school safe?
Yeah.
And is there a way to get kids to safety in that school and out, or to keep people out that, that shouldn't be in there.
Right.
And so this, again, the layers of consideration here.
This goes way beyond historic preservation.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, people love West High, and I get it. It is it's a placemaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lots of memories. Again, with preservation, you have to consider the building. Not every building's going to be saved, and not every building should be saved. But we have to consider the overall picture, and West High is one of those complicated scenarios.
Yeah. I mean, I'm hoping for the best, but fingers crossed, but also approach it with real eyes on this. There's a lot of issues here.
So we'll see what's going to happen with that. This next one, again, so it's kind of a very controversial one for a little while. It's just died down because there's not much movement on it. This is the Liberty Wells Ward, 1990 South, 500 East. It was built in 1926. It has not been utilized by the LDS Church for quite a while. It did sustain some earthquake damage back in 2020. But here was what got everyone talking, is that when the LDS Church put this building up for sale, the stipulation for the buyers was that it had to be demolished. And that's when everyone, like in our world, and when we brought it to the greater public, started saying, why can't we keep this building?
Yeah. And, there was also, I think it was a SHPO in their conference when they had it. This was also addressed at that, where people questioned why the church is stipulating that upon sale it has to be raised, basically.
Right.
Their response hasn't ever sat well with me, if I'm being 100% honest. And this isn't me being anti-Mormon church. This is me being pro-preservation, I think, or pro-community.
Pro-community.
The places like this, to stipulate that they have to be sold, that once they're sold, they have to be demolished, and then to try to tie it into, well, it's for the betterment of the community because we sold these before and they sat vacant and people don't have the money to preserve them, or it has like structural issues. I get that.
Or the buyers come back and said, hey, this has a lot more problems than what we thought, and you need to give us some money to help bring it up to code so that we can do what we want with it. Yeah.
But also, like, if you really care about the community, do your due diligence. Do your due diligence on the buyer when you're selling it.
Right.
If you care about the community, this place should stand. It is a community center, or it was. People still live in that neighborhood that have place attachment to that ward. Mm-hmm. People have went to church there, had celebrations there. It's had community events there. There's been funerals there. People have lived and died there, literally. It's provided people with place throughout their entire lives. Mm-hmm. And when you start to erase these places, you start to erase the meaning of that community and place remembrance, and it affects the well-being of a community.
Right.
So if you really care about the well-being of a community, I would counter-argue with the church that you would do proper due diligence on the buyers, make sure they have the funds to maintain this building, and give people the option to keep it standing.
Exactly.
Instead of just saying it has to be demolished.
Yep. You
can do better.
You can do better.
And you're not. You're failing these communities. And not only is it a community issue, but it's a church issue for you, because the people that care most about these buildings are in your own church.
Exactly. And it kind of lets us know what's the fate for all of the other historic LDS chapels that may come up for sale. What's the fate for them?
Yeah. I have questions around, is this erasure of early church history? Because we know it's an issue with TikTok right now. And I don't say that lightly. I'm not saying that to speculate, but it's sort of a fact of this matter that, other organizations have done this exact same thing when they've been under fire. And this church in particular has one of the biggest real estate holdings in the world, definitely in America.
And a big percentage of Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And places that you wouldn't even think are church-owned.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You can't tell me that they don't have the manpower to do due diligence on buyers.
Yeah.
And this is multi-layered, I think. And there has to be some more serious discussions around it.
There's a lot of questions that I'm afraid we will not get the answers for.
Yeah. I haven't heard an answer to our questions I've been satisfied with.
I agree. And I mean, as of right now, the Liberty Wells ward is sitting there with a fence up around it. Mm-hmm. And it has been sitting there for years. And again, a building that is not occupied falls into disrepair very quickly.
Yeah.
And fires.
And mysterious fires.
Yeah. And
we'll never get away from that.
and just so everybody knows, there is a tone difference between how I talk about the West Side School and a ward house. And the reason why there is a tone difference is because I recognize the issues the city is facing with taxation and what they can do and what school districts can do. This church is a multi-billion-dollar organization.
Yeah.
Some of the biggest land holdings in the United States.
Right.
They can do better. I'm not saying this to be harsh. I'm putting this on a scale of where people's ability is to meet these challenges, and their abilities far exceed anybody else's right now.
It's like when we talk about the developers, right?
Yeah.
We just talked about a whole bunch of developers that are integrating a historic building into their new development. So it's the same, like developers can do better.
Yeah.
You know, those that sell these places can do better.
Absolutely.
Now we had this came up I think just this year, where Judge Memorial Catholic High School, the Catholic Diocese announced that they were looking to possibly sell the property and relocate the high school to a different location. And that brings up the problem of Our Lady of Lourdes. It's at 670 South, 1100 East. It was built around 1913. What is going to happen with this chapel that is beloved by the community and is very historic significant? What's going to happen to it when the diocese, if and when the diocese sells the property? We have not had any clear answers about what that would do with the chapel.
Yeah, definitely something to watch for in the coming year.
Yep. This is one that Adrienne has brought up to us, and it's the Lighthouse Ministry. This used to be the Lighthouse Ministry bookstore, and this is actually like a bigger issue within Ballpark. It's at 1358 Southwest Temple. The house was built around 1897, is what I found. The Lighthouse Ministry was ran by Sandra and Gerald Tanner. And their aim was to help those going through a faith crisis within the LDS Church to find answers or a safe place for them to search for answers that they may have about the LDS Church on their own. And they ran this ministry out of this house for years and years. Gerald passed away, and unfortunately Sandra had to sell the house. So now this house is threatened along with similar other houses along that same road. And I believe, Rachel, you did a post about this, if I recall, this location of all of these houses in Ballpark.
Yeah, so the Tanner House is a stunning Victorian-style home. There's a virtual tour that you can take, and you can see all of the original woodwork. It's in amazing condition. And then there's an adjacent bookstore that the ministry ran. But this is right by Smith's Ballpark, and there's another large parking lot nearby. And so it's a very attractive place for a developer to just, tear down a few historic buildings and then build a large new complex.
Right. And I mean, ballpark
And
with
it was called the Lighthouse
the
Ministries.
Lighthouse Ministry.
Yeah,
Thank
Utah
you.
Lighthouse Ministries.
Thank you.
And they have a number of books. I mean, it's still
They're still
active.
active. I believe what I read is they're no longer publishing, but the books that are available you can still get. But that's kind of this is the bigger problem of what's going on in Ballpark. Ballpark has a lot of issues.
And
Yeah.
Ballpark is another one of those overlooked neighborhoods of Salt Lake. It hasn't really gotten a lot of funding attention until very recently.
With the announcement of the ballpark being moved out to Daybreak, what's going to happen with, is it Smith's Ballpark now?
Yes.
Yeah.
What's going to happen with Smith's Ballpark, and the city doing, bringing in a lot of people to ask about what to do with that. But, you hear a lot of people in Ballpark talking about a lot of the vacant buildings, a lot of vacant houses. The crime rate has gone up. And yeah, you're right. Like, wanting to know the answers from the city, what are you going to do about our community? Because they really do feel left out.
Yeah. Now, the master plan, the city did a master plan for the Ballpark Station area only in late 2022. And, that master plan is a idea of how they want the city to be developed. But often in these master plans, they have new zoning that goes along with it that does not prioritize historic preservation. It actually incentivizes demolition.
Exactly.
And you can see that in the Central Ninth area. There used to be a lot of historic homes. Again, it was in a red line district, so there was a lot of homes of people of color. And so much of that, especially along Jefferson Street, has been demolished. And that, I don't know. It's near transit, so there's a lot of higher density housing.
Right. Going in there, the push for higher density housing right around the tracks line.
Yeah. It's just unfortunate that a lot of places that are important for people of color have been demolished because of that growth.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So Ballpark is definitely something for us to keep an eye on. This next one, Chris, you brought this to our attention. St. Christopher's Mission. It's located in Bluff, Utah. It was established in 1943, and it consists of about 10 historic buildings. And why is this on our watch list?
Yes, this actually came to me because Melanie Little, who's in charge of the master's program at Goucher College, works with a nonprofit, and she came down last year to work on this building, and they did some restoration on it. And it's historic because of the communities it served. And also, they are working diligently to try to restore it and the buildings, and just looking for help on it, I guess, is probably the best way to term it.
Right.
But it's a really interesting place when you look at it. Made out of red rock material, definitely Southwest design, and it's just a really cool mission. And it's one to watch for because they're trying their best to keep it going. But as you know, with stuff like this, that can sometimes go sideways.
Right.
And there, a lot of people don't. It's such a sparsely populated area, so a lot of people don't know about places like this. And so it doesn't ever appear on our radars up here.
Right.
And it doesn't get talked about. But it is still important to the culture of Utah. It adds that layer and that depth.
Right.
And it also represents underserved communities or underrepresented. And so it has a lot of importance there.
So the Carlisle House came on our radar about a month ago. This is located at Alpine, Utah. It is a historically significant house in Alpine. And there is a school that is located next to the house.
Yes.
The school purchased the land or is looking to purchase the land? They did purchase land, correct?
The school owns a Carlisle house on the land that it sits upon.
And their plan was to demolish the house and build something new for the school.
Well, when they bought it, they said they were actually going to use it as a library or a classroom, and they threw around all these ideas. And they bought it from a lady that had a photo shop there. And, she had done a lot of restoration on it and sold it under the pretenses that, from my understanding and from what I'm told,
it would be saved.
That it would be saved. And then they quickly started talking about, like, well, it doesn't really work for us, and there's this issue and this issue and this issue, blah, blah, blah. And then, let's demolish it for a parking lot.
Oh, like seriously, a parking lot?
Yeah. I'm not being sarcastic when I say that.
It really is.
It's so frustrating. And what's even more frustrating about this, and by the time this episode airs, when we put this online, this house may very well be gone.
Yeah.
So just so everybody knows what's currently happening as we're talking about this on December 17th is when we're recording this. There is a cash buyer that has stepped forward that has said, I will buy this place. The school has went in front of the city, and the mayor and the city council of Alpine has said, we would like to see this place sold to this cash buyer. They've restored several houses here before. They're good people. We know who they are. If you sell it, we'll give you this property adjacent to it. You can make that into a parking lot. The school board, being run, their head of school board's developer, he basically went back to the city in this meeting and said, well, we'd like our cake and eat it too. We'd like to demolish and also get this lot. And the city was just like, not the wisest of choices. And so from my understanding, the city is basically saying to the school board, please sell this place.
We strongly recommend you sell this place.
Basically, whatever you build on this is going to need permits.
Wink, wink.
Yes. And so I think it would be a very dumb move by the school to knock it down on several levels, because there's several layers here. The community is starting to react to it finally. And there's also been a lot of social media activity. There's been a lot of news activity happening. There was a protest. At this point in time, they are still considering a purchase on it.
Yeah, it's still up in the air. And you can go to both our Instagram and Rachel's Instagram and see pictures of the house and read more about the history and what's going on with it. But right now we're just playing a waiting game.
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful building, and it also just has such a good history.
Right.
It has a history around the community. Fanny and Thomas Carlisle, who built the house, were notorious for being, and notorious probably isn't the right word, but they were just so well known in the community for being good people.
Exactly.
And just taking care of the people around them.
Right.
And when you read the National Register documents on this, it's not on the National Register, but there was documents prepared for it. There's 5 pages that talk about all their good deeds.
What they did for the community, yeah.
And also, the thing I loved about this, even though it's only a very small section, but sometimes this gets left out of older nominations, is they included some Indigenous history and on the land, and also how Fanny interacted with the Indigenous populations, allowing them to camp on the land when she owned it.
That's cool.
Taking them in from storms, drying their blankets for them, and also just helping people in need.
Yeah.
And so it has this long history of being a community asset, and it would be a shame to see it go.
It would be. Oh, we should also add that with the demolition of the building, that the local fire department was actually going to use it as a training.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
They were going to burn it and use it as a training. And
they did not because the community responded.
The community responded, and they decided that that wasn't a good idea.
No. And this actually came up in the school board meeting, too, was that the people that were trying to buy it or advocating to save it, and they have the cash buyer they're working with, but told them in a meeting that, this would be like a slap in the face to the community to do this, and they still plan to go forward with it.
I think one of our followers messaged me and said that she had ran across the fire department taking out doors and removing windows.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that's how that's how close these things get sometimes. Yeah. And so this, I know, Chris, you've been working with some people on this.
Yeah, behind the scenes.
And I mean, it just shows you how quickly things can go downhill.
Yeah.
And how, like, minute by minute, we just do not know what's going to happen, even when a house is actively being pursued for preservation. It could be lost in a minute. We just don't know.
This could be one of those fires that happen. I mean, they almost did it in broad daylight.
Right.
It's a really scary story because I have been involved in this for the last several months, working to help people that were trying to save it, giving them narratives, also advising them on how I would handle certain things. Right. And, I've worked hand in hand with them, and to see and hear what's been happening behind the scenes is highly disturbing.
Right. Yep.
Because it has been very clear that some of the people in charge do not
don't care.
Yeah. And, when you have people that want development at all costs, they ignore the community, and they have shown they're willing to do that. And, by the time this episode airs, who knows what has happened,
You'll stay tuned with us.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got through our list, and we have a lot to keep an eye on in 2024. And we'll keep you posted as we learn the fate of some of these buildings and anything new that comes up, because that's what we do. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today. Remind our listeners again where they can find you.
I run Rachel's SLC History on Instagram, and my blog is slchistory.org.
And Rachel also periodically does tours.
Oh, I do, yes. I teach a walking tour of Salt Lake's unseen history through the University of Utah Lifelong Learning. And those are open to anyone. And it's a 2-hour tour on 2 different days. I take you to the South Central City neighborhood, as well as the old Franklin Avenue and the Gallivan Center.
So you get to learn some history that your teacher didn't teach you.
Yes, it's all stuff that I did not learn in my Utah studies class.
Yeah, imagine that. We'll put links for Rachel and also our friend Adrienne, who couldn't make it today. We'll put links of where to find both of them in our show notes. This podcast was researched and written by myself, Chris, Rachel, and Adrienne. We all got together and put this all together ourselves. And it was produced by Mike Gillen. Thank you, Mike. You can find us at Demolished Salt Lake Podcast on Instagram and Facebook and Threads. Also on Twitter at Demolished SL Pod, where we post pictures of the places we talk about as a variety of different content. If you have been following us this month, we've been doing a revisit of Ghosts of Christmas Past. And we're doing a countdown to Christmas with just some really cool pictures and a little bit of history about what Salt Lake and other cities in Utah have looked like during Christmas time. And speaking of that, we wish you all a very happy holiday season. And we'll see you all in the new year.
Yeah. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.